Hi, it's Krista at the Secret Yarnery. Today we are making this gorgeous rose granny square. This rose granny square can be made on its own. You could do a whole bunch and make a pillow, or you could edge a blanket. They are really spectacular. They're also really strong. The center doesn't come out like a little slinky. They are nice and sturdy. And they're also part of BloomScape CAL 2023, which is a new flower granny square in the same block. So a new flower every month, and we'll join it together to make this gorgeous BloomScape blanket at the end of the year. If you'd like to follow along with a written pattern, it's available over on my website, secretyarnery.com. And you don't have to worry about being able to read a pattern. All of my patterns are written in plain English, just like I'm speaking in this video. To make this rose granny square, you will need 3 different colors of yarn, one for your petals, one for your leaves underneath, and one for your block. I am using Favorite from Ice Yarns and also a 5mm crochet hook. You will also need a pair of scissors and a needle for sewing in your ends. So let's get started. So take your flower color and you want to leave a long tail. We're going to use this for sewing our rose together. So probably about 12 to 14 inches, and make a slip knot. Any which way you normally do. Shrink that down and pop it onto your hook. And chain 66. 1, 2, 3, 64, 65, and 66. So there is my chain 66. Now just roll that to the side. We're looking for these back loops, or to count our chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to skip 5, and we're going to work into the 6th chain. You can work into the back loops or into the front of your chain. It doesn't matter. Just skip 5 chains and work into the 6th. So wrap your yarn and into the 6th chain from your hook, 1 double crochet. Skip 2 stitches, so 1 and 2. We're going to work into the 3rd, right there. We're going to make a V-stitch. So into the 3rd chain, a V-stitch of 1 double crochet, chain 2, 1 and 2, and 1 double crochet into that same chain. Just like that. Now we're going to skip 2 chains, 1 and 2, and work into the 3rd, right there, with a V-stitch. So wrap your yarn into the 3rd chain, 1 double crochet, chain 2, 1 and 2, and 1 double crochet into that same chain. Just like that. So now you can pause the video and keep working along, skipping 2 chains and making a V-stitch into the 3rd chain. So that a V-stitch is 1 double crochet, chain 2, and 1 double crochet. So you're going to do that into the 3rd chain all the way down along your work, and I will meet you when we get to the end of our chain. Have you subscribed to this channel? Go ahead and hit this button under this video right now so you don't miss out on any more fun stuff just like this. At the end of our row, we have 3 chains left. If you have 1 chain left, that's fine. Just pretend you're finished. Don't do anything else. If you have 4 chains left, just skip them all and work into the last one. It doesn't really matter. If you have 2, skip 1 and work into the next. It's up to you. It's a flower. It's not going to be the biggest of deal. No one's going to see it. But in a perfect world, skip 2 and into that very last chain, we're going to do our last V-stitch. So into the last chain, we'll do our last V-stitch. So 1 double crochet, chain 2, and 1 double crochet into that same chain. And that finishes row 1. To start row 2, chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and turn your work. Into this very first V-stitch, the center of that first V, we'll make 1 double crochet, chain 2, 1 and 2, and 2 double crochets into that same V space. 1 and 2. Just like that. Into the next space, right over here, the center of the next V, we're going to do a little house. And our little houses are 2 double crochets. There's 1 and 2. Chain 2, 1 and 2, and 2 double crochets into the same space, the same spot. Just like that. So we're building a little house into each of our V stitches all the way along. So into the next space, the next center of the V stitch, right there, we're going to do 2 double crochets, 1 and 2, chain 2 for your roof, 1 and 2 more double crochets to finish off that little house, 1 and 2. So there's our little front door and our 2 walls. So there's our little house. So now pause the video and keep working along to making a little house of 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets into the center of each of these V stitches all the way along. And I'll meet you when we get to the end of our row. At the end of your row, you just have this one little space left. That counts as our last V stitch. So right into that space, we're going to make our last house. So 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets into that very last space. There's 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 more double crochets just to finish off our row, just like that. So that finishes row 2. To start row 3, chain 1 and turn your work. Into this very first stitch, right here, we're going to do our first single crochet just to start the row. So 1 single crochet into that first stitch. And now into the center of our house, into that front door, we're going to do 8 double crochets. So 8 double crochets into the center of that house. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now we're going to make 1 single crochet into the space between the houses. So these little spots here are going to get single crochets. And the center of our houses are going to get our big shells of 8 double crochets. So into this space in between the houses, 1 single crochet. And into the front door of that house, 8 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. In between the houses, that space in the little valley down here, 1 single crochet. So now you can pause the video and keep working along. 8 double crochets into the center of the house and a single crochet into the space between houses all the way along this row, and I will meet you when we get to the end. If you're enjoying this video, hit that thumbs up. At the end of your row, look for the top of that chain 3. We want to just go in so we have 2 strands of that chain on the top of our hook. So just slide your crochet hook in, 2 strands on the top, and make 1 single crochet and chain 1. Cut your yarn. Now I also leave a long tail here, maybe about a foot, 12 inches or so. We want long enough tails to sew our flower together later. So pull your hook up and your yarn through and snug that down to secure. To start row before, use the same color yarn as you did for your flower and leave again about a 14-inch tail, 14 to 16 inches. Make a slip knot any which way you normally do. Shrink that down, pop it onto your hook, and chain 12. 1, 2, 3, 11, and 12. Now into this very first chain, right there, right on top of our slip knot, we're just going to work into that chain with one little slip stitch to form a ring. So just slip stitch any which way. And now we want to get rid of this tail. We just want to get it out of the way. We're not working over it at all. That is our sewing yarn. So just leave it out of the way and chain 1. Now into the center of this ring, we're going to make 32 double crochets. So 1, 2, 3. Now you can pause the video and keep working around 32 double crochets, and I'll meet you when we get back to where we started. If you need more room, you can just grab your ring and your stitches and just slide them back. That'll give you more room along your ring, so your double crochets will lay down nice and flat. When you get back to where we started, we're going to go into that very first double crochet. It's right here on a bit of an angle. That is our first double crochet. So we're just going to slide our hook in under both strands of that V, both strands of that stitch, and slip stitch to join. Chain 1 and cut your yarn. You can also leave a bit of a longer tail, but not that much, maybe 6 or 7 inches. Pull your hook up and your yarn through and snug that down to secure. And that finishes row 4. Now it's time to assemble our rows. We have one end with tails on it, and we have one end without. We want to find the end without any tails. If you just slide that stitch down, those double crochets, it goes nice and flat. So we just want to fold that in half right there, keeping this bottom edge nice and flat. And then looking for our chain, we're just going to wrap it around, keeping this first chain, keeping this here above. We don't want to cover up any of the previous rows or the previous chain. So we are just going to go under the last row. So it's going to be a little bit of a mountain, a little bit of a hill, but we don't mind that. See how I'm just lining up my chain underneath the chain of the previous round. And we just keep working around, keeping the chain underneath or below the chain of the previous lap or wrap. Just like this. I'm not pulling, but just like this. So we do have a little bit of a mountain in the beginning. Working with the tail right from our chain, I could have threaded my needle before. That would be handy. So thread your needle if you haven't already threaded your needle. And now I'm going to work in underneath those rows of chain all the way up into the center. So I make sure I have all of those rows or those rounds on my needle. So up into the middle. And I'm not pulling too tight. I'm just letting my needle and my yarn do the work. And then back down, I also want to make sure I get each of those rows or each of those layers on my needle. Just like that. So now skip a couple stitches or skip a stitch and work your way across again. Now we've already grabbed that center, so we can push it down a little bit so it gets flat with the rest of our rows. And now we're just going to work back and forth, giving it a small little tug, skipping a stitch and working all the way back, making sure we get in underneath every row of chain. And then I just keep doing this until I run out of yarn. Here we are. Making sure every layer or every round of chain is on my needle. When your tail is nice and short, you've sewed your flower together quite a bit. I'm just going to bring it back out at the same spot where my petals are finishing, just so it's handy. And take my needle back. Now I'm going to thread the other tail we have. Now flip your rows over and just find a spot where you like where this last petal is going to be. You could pull it over, you could have it loose, it's up to you. Just kind of hold it and find a spot where it feels like it belongs. Keep it in that same spot, flip it over and sew it to the last or to the next row of petals. So I'm attaching these 2 rows like that, and now just kind of sew it together all the way down, bringing your tail down to the center where our other tail is. Now, if you have sewed this together where you're confident you used a lot of yarn, it's nice and snug together, we can just knot these 2 tails together. If your tail wasn't long enough and you'd still like to go back and forth underneath your petals to hold it together a little more, you have more yarn on this needle as well. So you could always just go through a couple times. Optional, of course, depending on how much yarn, depending on how many times you've sewn it in yourself with the first tail. You're welcome to use this tail as well. That's why we left 2 long tails, so you can really make sure that you have stitched this closed enough. When you're happy with it, just give this a nice double knot and snug it down. I'm going to give it 1 more knot, so that's 3 knots, and then really snug it down. And I'm going to sew in these tails. So I'm going to thread my needle with both strands. You could sew them in individually also. And then underneath, I'm just going to bring them out on the other side, just so they're not going to wiggle out in the future. And these sharp tip needles really do help. They're linked in the description box under my videos. They are a game changer. So if you haven't grabbed yourself a bunch of these sharp tips, I suggest putting it on your list and just snip those tails off. And there is your flower done. That is ready. Now we're going to put on the base. This here. So we have our pretty stitches with our V's going around the edge. We want that facing down. And now we can just kind of wiggle this ring around that flower base we just made. See how that just kind of fits together really nice? Great. Now our long tail from where we started, the one we didn't work over, thread that onto your needle. And now just start going in just to that last chain. And we can even just whip stitch it. So go into the ring with your 32 double crochets and go into the last chain or the outer ring of your flower. Just from your ring into the flower. So from the ring into the flower, all the way around. That's why I do it in the same color, so that we won't really see all this whip stitch action. There we go. So I've worked all the way around a little whip stitch, so that is really stuck all the way around. And the center of the flower also doesn't come out. Everything is stitched together. So I'm done with this tail for this minute. So thread the tail from the outer side of your circle where we finished our double crochets. And just bring this one into where your other tail is, just closer. And now I'm going to go inside my flower, just on the other side. Just bringing that tail through. Now just take your tail and pop it through, just underneath, just where those petals meet that ring. And now we can give it a knot, and it'll hide itself underneath our flower. So 1, 2, give that a big pull, not a big pull, a medium pull. 3, now give it a big pull so it'll never come undone, and thread both of your tails. You could thread them 1-1 and just do it individual. This is just a little bit of laziness here. Now we're just going to take our tails from one side to the other just to make sure they're hidden forever. So just pushing it through. I don't want to see my needle here. And I want it coming out right by where that disc is, or where we joined our ring, right down there. So just pull those tails across your flower. And now we can cut those off. They'll be nice and stuck down there, just like that. And now we're ready to put on our leaves. With your leaf color, we just want to find a stitch. I do look for where I joined, where that chain is, where we started. Just this kind of little bit of a messy area. I'm going to work in like one stitch after, just right there. Just so if there's any discrepancy in my stitch count, it's going to be where this mess is anyway. So we're just making one mess for ourselves. So working into the pretty side of our stitches, so in between our petals and our little ring base, just slide your hook into that stitch. Loop of your leaf color on your hook. You don't need a long tail, just a regular size tail now. Bring it through and slip stitch with both strands to join. Drop your tail. You can hold it along the top edge of your work and chain 2. 1 and 2. So this counts as our first double crochet. Wrap your yarn and into the same stitch, 1 double crochet. Chain 2, 1 and 2. Now drop your tail. We can't work over it anymore. We're going to skip 2 stitches, 1 and 2. We're going to go into the third, right there. So into the third stitch, 1 single crochet, chain 2, skip 1. So we're just skipping 1 stitch right there. We're working into the second, 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1, 2, skip 2 stitches. So skipping 1, skipping 2, working into the third, right there. We're going to do a corner. Corners, 2 double crochets, chain 2, and 2 double crochets. So there's my 2 double crochets, chain 2, into the same stitch, 2 more double crochets. 1 and 2. Chain 2, 1 and 2, skip 2 stitches, 1 and 2, working into the third, 1 single crochet, chain 2, skip 1, so we're skipping that 1 stitch right there, into the second, 1 single crochet, chain 2, skipping 2 stitches, so we're skipping these 2 stitches right there, working into the third. We're going to do a corner, 2 double crochets, there's 1 and here's 2, chain 2, 1 and 2, and 2 more double crochets into that same stitch. 1 and 2. Chain 2, 1 and 2, skip 2, so we're skipping those 2 stitches right there, working into the third, 1 single crochet, chain 2, skip 1, working into the second, 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 and 2, skipping 2 stitches and working into the third. We're going to do a corner. So 2 double crochets, 1 and 2, chain 2, 1 and 2, and into that same stitch, 2 more double crochets. 1 and 2. Chain 2, 1, 2, skip 2, there's 1 and 2, working into the third, 1 single crochet, chain 2, skip 1 into the second, 1 single crochet, chain 2, 1 and 2, and now we're back where we started. So we're going to skip this mess, doesn't matter how many stitches there are. We're going to work straight into this corner, or right where we started, that's going to be a corner. So into that very same stitch, 2 double crochets, 1 and 2, chain 2, 1 and 2, and we're going to slip stitch into the top of our chain to join. Right there. We want to make sure we have 2 strands of that stitch on the top of our hook. So slip stitch to join, chain 1 to secure your yarn, cut your yarn, just leaving a normal tail that you can sew in with a needle later, pull your hook up and your yarn through, and snug that down to secure. So there is our layer of leaves on our rose. So that finishes round 5. Grab your color that you're using for your block or the square part of your granny square. Find a corner that we haven't joined in and just pop your hook into that corner space. Loop of your block color on your hook, bring it through and slip stitch with both strands to join. Drop your tail, just holding it along the edge of your work, and chain 2. 1 and 2. So this counts as our first double crochet. Now into the same corner space, 2 double crochets. 1 and 2. Into the next space, 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3, and 3 double crochets into each of these spaces along the side, the last 2 spaces. 3 double crochets into each. So 1, 2, and 3, and I'm just jumping over into the next space, 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. Into this corner space, we're going to do a granny square corner. So that is 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. So here is 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. So now I can pause the video, 3 double crochets into each of these spaces along the side, just like that. And now into our corner space right here, we're going to do a granny corner. So 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. There's 1, 2, 3, chain 2, 1 and 2, and 3 more double crochets into the same corner space. 1, 2, and 3. So now you can pause the video and keep working along. 3 double crochets into each space along the sides, and corners of 3 double crochets, chain 2, and 3 double crochets. And I'll meet you when we get back to where we started. When you get back to where we started, we're just going to finish off our round with 3 double crochets into that same corner space. 1, 2, and 3. Now I'm going to show you 2 different ways to join. So if you are joining and you're going to keep going, chain 1, and you're going to join to the top of that chain 3, just this stitch right there, 2 strands on the top of your hook. You're going to join with a single crochet. So a single crochet to join, and then just hold that open. That leaves you right in the middle of that corner space. So then you would do your chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and turn your work. If you are turning your rows into the BloomScape CAL block or the BloomScape CAL square, I will link the tutorial for this block in the description down below and in the cards up above. And if you are finished, then you're going to join with a chain 2, 1 and 2, and you're going to slip stitch into the top of that chain 3. Just one little slip stitch and a chain 1 to secure your yarn. Cut your yarn, leaving a tail long enough to sew in with a needle later. Pull your hook up and your yarn through and snug that down to secure. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I did. I'm waiting for you in that video right there, and stay hooked.